Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Today we'll be talking about Texas industry. You may hear my dog in the background also making comments on the slideshow. And we start our slideshow with a cotton mill. And so here we go. Before we can get started, we need to talk about some class particulars. First, great job, you guys. You're getting the word out to participate in my channel. I'm having some folks still not on board, and that's okay. You guys that are on board are getting graded. So be sure that every day you look at my YouTube channel, Charlie Baldwin, Texas History. Also be sure to watch CNN 10. And then you need to answer the questions Tuesday through Friday. So there's no questions today because it's a Monday. At cbaldwin at sacbstx.org. And remember, you are being graded. Now, this last week, I gave a lot of people 105, a few people 110. And even if you got things wrong, I gave you 100. This week, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to cap the grading off at 100. And then if you miss something, we'll give you a 90 or whatever. I don't want this to be a terrible, terrible experience. I just want you to do the best that you can. The other thing that's happening is that some of you are looking at my questions like a research paper. It's not that. If you could just look at the PowerPoint from the day before and answer the questions, that'll be great. You guys seem to be doing best of the three grades as far as understanding what's going on. So on with the show. So the first industry that we need to talk about in Texas is the Texas banking system. Okay, so when the Republic first started, a lot of early banks in Texas failed. And because of that, depositors lost their money. It's not like today. If a bank closes today, the federal government insures you up to $250,000. They didn't do that back then. And so if your bank closed, you just lost your money. That's just how it was. So a lot of people don't trust banks. And remember, those early banks dealt with agriculture. They loaned money in good times, but when bad times came along and people couldn't pay them back, they foreclosed. And just a lot of times the bank just couldn't keep up and they just closed down. The very first successful commercial bank was in 1835, and that's the Banco Comercial y Agricultura. Okay? And so a commercial bank is a bank that's open for profit. In other words, you put your money in, they loan your money out, and they charge interest on it, and that's why it's called a commercial bank. Lamar wanted a bank for the Republic of Texas, and because of this distrust of banks, a lot of people refused to do that. So after the Civil War, Texas had state chartered banks. That means the state operated um, oversaw the operation of the bank. There were also national banks, so the United States had national banks, but there were a lot of private banks that operated in Texas, mainly from the cotton industry. So people made tons of money off of cotton, and then they opened their own banks. But you can imagine the circus of all these different banks and all these different types of banks. So in 1907, Texas began the Department of Insurance and Banks to regulate banks. And today that department still operates, and we are still using that system so that you just don't have any kind of bank springing up. So what are the industries in Texas? Well, the first industry in Texas was a grist mill. And what a grist mill does is it takes your corn or it takes your wheat and it turns it into flour. Um, and it does this by water power. So it has these huge wheels that are turned by river water, okay? And the river water turns the wheel and that operates a stone on the inside that grinds your corn or grinds your wheat down to flour. The next industry in Texas was the lumber mills, and we showed that on the previous slide. And in fact, the lumber mills or the sawmills were so popular that they started their own towns like Silsbee, towns like Woodville, towns like Lumberton. Notice Lumberton, Woodville. So they were they sprang up in the 1830s, and they were always very popular. The lumber industry is still popular today. Um, of course, the big industry in Texas was cotton, and so cotton and cotton gins um, were very important. Cotton gins operated all over the state of Texas. There's a cotton gin museum on 290 on your way to Austin. I've never had the pleasure of going in it, but I'm sure it's semi-interesting. And then during the Civil War, Texas made rifles, ammunition, and uniforms, and they were all made in Texas. Okay. Um, the uniforms were made of wool, though, not cotton. Uh, the coal, iron, and limestone industries were big in Texas. One of the things that the book didn't mention, which I was kind of disappointed about, was carriage making. We had a very nice carriage factory in Dallas. And then, of course, in the 1880s, we started having salt mines. So that was the industries in Texas before the big oil boom, before Spindletop.